Well, first of all, let me apologize to everyone. Some of us were here on time, and I want to thank those of us who came on time. I want to thank those of us who have joined latterly, and I want to therefore welcome all of you to the second day of panels, second day of full panels at the International Reggae Conference being staged in 2013 and in Reggae Month, incidentally. This panel featured 4 presenters, but there are only 2 present with us now. I hope it is that they're going to join us at some point. I'm not sure if there have been any kind of difficulties that they're facing, but we are now going to proceed with the panel. Our first presenter, we have changed the order a bit because of technical issues. Our first presenter is Dr. Lawrence Bamikole, and he's a senior lecturer in philosophy in the Department of Language, Linguistics, and Philosophy here at the Mona campus. His research fields are, in fact, social and political philosophy, Africana philosophy, and comparative philosophy. And I'll just have him introduce his paper to us. Thank you.
Good morning, my colleagues, the chairperson and my co-presenters. The title of my presentation is The Identity of the African Woman in the Music of Shola Allyson Obaniyi. The picture of the artist is shown on the screen. Young lady, a pop singer. Obaniyi has rendered many songs. But what is unique about her is that most of these songs actually reflect certain cultural realities of the Yoruba space. And this morning, I have just taken a tract from one of her songs called Obinrin. In Yoruba, Obinrin means a woman. And so what I'm just trying to show is that the song Obinrin reflects the identity of the African woman. And so I will just start by saying some few things about music, which is a form of artistic expression that reflects the feelings and emotions of artists. This author, Benjamin Ray, actually observed that the feelings and emotions of the artist most of the time reflect the subjective experiences and certain objective realities within the social spaces of the artist. Now, we know that music is a form of aesthetics, and aesthetics is a branch of philosophy. Now, there are 2 views about aesthetics corresponding to 2 philosophical traditions. The Western philosophical tradition sees art and beauty as expressions of the artist's subjective feelings and emotions, whereas the African philosophical tradition moves forward to say, over and above the expression of emotions and feelings, artists often, with their songs, reflect the cultural realities of the space they occupy. And of course, this is a position that has been held by Professor Onyewenyi. Saying that the works of artists actually reflect their cultural spaces does not actually preclude the fact that their works can actually reflect universal values. And as we can see from the songs of Bob Marley, the reflection of freedom, equality, sympathy, empathy, These are the values which Bob Marley was projecting in most of his music. And so in this paper, I shall focus attention on this lady's song, Shola Obaniyi. She's a Yoruba from Nigeria. And my argument here is that the identity of the African woman, we know that identity changes from time to time in relation to time and space. But my argument here is that even within those changes, there are still certain core values that somehow remain unchanged, and these are the core values that can actually identify a particular person or a particular group of persons. The next slide that I will discuss is in particular to the Yoruba art forms, and there are different art forms within the Yoruba reality. There are proverbs, there are music, there are poems, there are storytelling, dance, oratory. But what is important is that all these art forms are didactic in character. They are meant to teach morals, and some of them actually have epistemic and ontological values also. Bewaji has observed that songs are also used as media for the development of sense of right and wrong in relation to the norms of socio-political and religious behaviors. And examples from what I have just said could be actually made from certain books, and I've quoted some, 2 books written by Dio Fagunwa. These books are written in Yoruba, but somehow there have been translations, and I'm not sure whether you are familiar with them. Now, the issue of identity of the African woman, there are certain conceptual problems that could be raised. And one of the problems is the question of the meaning of identity in its various usages. And within the literature, 2 broad divisions of identity have been identified: primordial identity, or identity as a construction. And here, I actually agree that identity is subject to change. But like I pointed out earlier on, my thesis is that even despite the changes in space and time, there are still core values that remain, which can actually be used to identify a person and a group of persons. And so that is the question that is being raised, that is there still an African woman in the face of modernity and globalization? And my answer here is yes, because there are still core values that are epistemic, ethical, and aesthetical that identify an African woman. These values identify the African woman as an individual, that is personal identity, as a wife, as a mother, a daughter-in-law, and a communal person also. These values are illustrated in Shola Obaniyi's song, Obìnrin ni mí. I want to play the song so that even though you may not be able to understand the wordings, I have a translation of the wordings of the song. You see, that is, I know that you cannot understand the song, but what I will do is to actually translate even this song into English language, which most of us will understand. She starts by saying that I am a woman I am complete in creation, that God has created her completely, properly. I am a woman. I will walk majestically. I will walk graciously as if I am feeling pain on my side. I will display my hand in a beautiful manner. I am a great helper to my husband. Yes, I am. I am the angel to the child, to God who created me. I am the one looked for by mothers-in-law, so give me respect. I am fully of beauty, I thank God. There is no mistake in my creation, rejoice with me. He that creates me, my God, I thank you. I give thanks to my God, rolling from right to left, because you created me as a woman. I was born with easiness, so much easiness. From my head to my toes, I am an epitome of beauty. You created me as an angel on earth. I thank you so much. I am the mother to the king and his other assistants. I am a care person. I am the salt of the world. Rejoice with me. I am different. I am so different. I am myself. I was created differently. I will not throw away my identity. My beauty is natural. My virtue is incomparable. I am an inestimable gold. I am shaggy. That is an appellation. I am honey. I cannot be purchased by money. My love cannot be purchased by money. Do not question my existence. Respect is what is due to me. I am the salt of the world. Rejoice with me. Without me, there is no life. I was obedient to the Creator's commandment in respect of breath and procreation. My womb houses the fetus. My womb houses the child. At birth, I cover the child with my blood. The child sucks my breast. My back gives succor to the child. I am a caregiver. I cook for the child in order for her to grow and to develop. Without the mother, the child will suffer. The child will suffer seriously. I am not to be disrespected. I am not to be disrespected. I am a woman. Look at the woman who leaves the hair tie and put on a man's cap. You should always go to where you are sent. This will guarantee joy. Let us stand in the position of a mother. Let us hold fast to our status as we are created by God. Let us take care of the world in relation to our husbands and children. This will guarantee for us a good future, a peaceful and fulfilled life. Let us dress as expected of us as women, so that our dresses go beyond our navel. We are never a pushover, not a pushover. We are women. That is the translation of that song. So what I have to do now, the next, is to analyze this song according to each of the lines. Now, on the whole, the rendition expresses the idea of identity as a primitive concept, which means that identity differentiates one individual from another. Identity is a mark of individuation. And secondly, identity is also a mark of unification, in the sense that you can always extend your individual identity to the collectivity, so that there can be what can be regarded as collective identity. Now, what Obaneji did in that song was to extend her own identity to the identity of a woman within the African context. And he mentioned certain values, which I have just read to you. In the first instance, her personal identity as a woman is a person who has a personal identity. You see, we know that within the African philosophical tradition, the communitarian social philosophy actually is preferred to the individualistic social philosophy. But the point is that sometimes the argument is being raised that if we are operating a communitarian system, how do we cater for the right of our individual? So within this song, it is actually explained that even though we are communitarian in our social system, there is still room for our individuality. And therefore, the communitarian nature does not actually absorb, our individuality. And that is expressed in that song. Now, lines 1 to 2 of that song express the primitive notion of identity. Lines 3 to 5 depict the features of a woman who has confidence in herself and hence not a pushover by men. Lines 6 to 10 depicts the identity of an African woman as a wife who is always by her husband, who is always cooking for the, for the home, who is always responsible. And as a mother to the child, because without a mother, according to that song, the child can hardly survive. Survival does not actually mean existence, that, a child who has a mother will be more responsible than the one who doesn't have one. And as a daughter-in-law also, because within the Yoruba context, you see, the daughter-in-law is so close to the mother of the husband, to the extent that the wife actually takes the mother of her husband as her own mother. Lines 11 to 18 depict the Yoruba traditional belief that women are identified with good fortunes. You see, Owero. You see, the belief is that the first child, if you are married and you have a baby girl as the first child, that is a good fortune because it is a feminine kind of thing. It means that throughout that marriage, you are going to be meeting with good fortune. Lines 19 to 23 in that songs actually is an affirmation of Obaniji's own existence, his own identity as a form of individuation. And I've mentioned this point earlier on. Lines 24 is Obaniji's view that she's totally against sexual objectification. Money cannot buy a woman within the African context. Money cannot buy love. What is important is that love must be intrinsic in itself. The value of a woman is intrinsic in itself. It is not extrinsic. It is not actually connected with whether you are rich in terms of monetary power or not. What is important is the responsibility of the woman and the love that the man shares with her. Lines 25 to 36 depict the importance of a woman in Yoruba society. A woman is not only an individual. She's a wife, she's a mother, and as a matter of fact, Agba Obinrin means the mother to members of the community, not only the immediate community, but surrounding communities also. Lines 39 to 49, Obaniji identifies a certain attitudes that should be upheld by an African woman. Now, you see, within modernity and globalization, we can say that women have the liberty to dress the way they like. But within the African context, which is also exemplified in that song, a woman cannot wear a cloth that is not beyond her navel. You should cover your whole body. Your body should not be seen, from the outside. And so that also is depicted in that song. Finally, the virtues of an African woman as a basic unit in the family are exposed. A woman signifies harmony within the family unit. And if it is true that a society is made up of the family, which is the smallest unit, and if there's harmony in the family, it is hoped that will be harmony within the general fabric of the society also. Conclusion. What we have done in this paper is to analyze, to see music as a form of artistic expression within the context of African philosophical tradition. We have also identified the identity of an African woman as illustrated in that song, rendered by Shola Obaniyi. And the values that she identified actually bring to the fore the collectivist philosophy of the African philosophical tradition. Thank you very much.
So my apologies, we actually have 3 presenters present, and our next presenter is Christian Akani. Chief Christian Akani comes to us from Nigeria. In fact, Ignatius Ajuru University of Education. His research interests are in the areas of African studies, human rights, and gender studies, and his area of specialization, political theory and development studies. He presents for us this morning, Celebrating African Unity and the Diaspora, the music of Bob Marley. Christian?
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am very proud and happy to be here. Thanks to the invitation of the organizers, especially the chair and Dr. Donna. I'm happy in the sense that this is my first time to go straight to my paper celebrating Bob Marley's contribution to African unity. Since I came here on 13th or 14th thereabout, the discussions have bared on the cultural implications of reggae music, the artistic implication, and all that. But today, I want to look at the political implication of Bob Marley's music. As a way of introduction, I want to say that since colonialism, the issue of unity has been very central in Africa. Even after the post-colonial era, unity has become very central. How can Africa unite to solve the contradictions of colonialism and solve the challenges of a nation building? And I just want to make a quote by an author called Mitchell. The lessons of the past, the challenges of the present, and the opportunities and possibilities of the future must be combined to achieve African unity now. This is the real challenge confronting Africa today. It is still unite or perish time, very much as Nkrumah diagnosed the challenge starkly and simply, unquote. You remember in 1963, Nkrumah wrote a very beautiful book, Africa Must Unite. And on 23rd May 1963, when Organization of African Unity was launched, almost every participant was given that copy. Shows the urgent desire, the necessity of having African unity, because as Nkrumah said, if there's no unity in Africa, it will be very possible for external forces to extinguish Africa and turn us back to the years of colonialism. So I am going to speak on that, looking at the specific contributions of Bob Marley to this discourse. The paper is divided into 4 sections. The introduction, which I have just mentioned, and to lay the foundation for what you call the African diaspora. How did they emerge? Did they emerge from the blues or the bush? After that, we will look at the specific contributions of Bob Marley and the conclusion. First is that let's go to the emergence of the diaspora. Of course, you know Africa is the wealthiest continent in the world and occupies 22% of the land mass on Earth. It has contributed immensely to what you call global civilization today. You remember Ethiopia, you remember Egypt. But unfortunately, these have been subjected to external invasions from the Assyrians, from Persia, and from Alexander the Great, who wanted to conquer the whole world. The implication of all these invasions was that many precious materials were taken away from Africa, and there was the renewed desire to rewrite the history of Africa, to demonstrate clearly that Africa never contributed anything towards civilization. By the 15th century, another invasion started. That invasion took place in 1404 because of 2 factors. One was the development of the hunger for sugar in European political economy. The other one was what today many people call, but I don't see it that way, the discovery of the New World by Christopher Columbus. But I don't think Christopher Columbus discovered the New World. I think it should be better renamed the first white man to visit the New World. Because as at the time he went there were people who were working, who were doing all of that things, which he erroneously called the Red Indians. So when the Portuguese established a plantation economy, a plantation farm in the Canary Island, that was the beginning of what you call slavery. And the experiments of that plantation, the success they got made them to venture to Africa. And by 1441, Africa became a haven to capture slaves, to capture us to work in these plantations. And by 1553, From 1441 to 1553, Portugal was very dominant in the slave economy. But you know what happens in capitalism? It's a question of rise and fall, because it is a law that is mediated by the law of the jungle. And by 1553, another power took over. That's the Spain took over from Portugal. And by 1588, England took over from Spain as the dominant power in the slave economy. And you remember at the time, Britain was called the mistress of the sea, the workshop of the world. Eric Williams, who wrote a very significant book called The Atlantic Slave Trade, said there's an organic link between the triumph of the Industrial Revolution and the slave economy, because he demonstrated clearly that the wealth that was derived from slavery was used in pioneering, facilitating, or sponsoring industrial revolution. And C.L. James also mentioned that. Which, by the time slavery was abolished, 1807, even up to 1888, more than 11 million Africans have been scattered in the so-called New World, and part of them are here. They were subjected to inhuman labor laws to produce wealth for strange masters. And the wealth they produced, they were not in control of those wealth. The wealth was in control of the so-called slave masters. And like Du Bois said, there was no rich family. There was no rich family in Britain that was not connected with the slave trade. And this is why I don't want to be part of the Liverpool club, because the Liverpool port was one of the dominant port that was very serious in transporting slave trade up to the Caribbean, anywhere. So by the time it was ended, more than 11 million Africans have been transported. I'm not counting those who died. There are some people that swore that instead of me to become a slave in a strange land, it's better for me to commit suicide. If you go to Ghana, in the Cape Coast, you discover most of our people that ran inside the water or killed themselves or did anything just to make sure that they were not slaves in the hands of foreigners. These slaves that were taken from Africa, supported by African potentates, transported here to work, are what we call the African diaspora. Today, the African diaspora are not only the slaves, but they have academics, businessmen, tourists who have come here to settle. I was just told that you have a sizable portion of Nigerians here. They are now part of African diaspora here. It's within this diaspora, what they call Africa in exile or a nation in exile, that a man called Robert Nesta Marley was born. Ordinarily, many people know him as Bob Marley. In Nigeria, not every person knows him as Robert Nesta Marley. But as soon as you mention Bob Marley, every person knows what the person I'm talking about. He was born in February 6, 1945, in the parish of St. Anne. And I think I would like to go there before I go. Bob Marley was part of a generation of youths who grew up from the concrete jungle of Trenchtown. And he passed through whatever his youths were doing because his father, Captain Nova Sinclair Marley, could not marry the mother because of racial segregation. Maybe he felt the family did not allow him, or the family saw it as a debasement of his skin, of his identity, which my brother talked about, to marry a black lady. And that will tell you the extent of suffering, dehumanization, and debasement our brothers and sisters suffered within the 15th, 17th, even up to the 18th centuries. But Marley was allowed to be taken care of by the mother. He became a child of a single parent. But he had a destiny. Destiny followed him. So passing through all the processes, particularly learning, becoming a member of the Rastafari movement, becoming a member of Magos Gavi's movement, he was able to know his identity, know where his parents came from, know their desires, and know their exploitations. For instance, Magos Gavi formed a group known as the Universal Negro Improvement Association. And the aim of that association, I want to quote, according to one of the lecturers here I mentioned, Africa is the legitimate, moral, righteous home of all Negroes. And now that the time is coming for all to assemble under their own vine and fig tree, we feel it our duty to arouse every Negro to a consciousness of himself. Bob Marley internalized this quotation, as we will remember, as we go for that, all these things reflected in his lyrics. And apart from this, parents were able to tell their children, look, we are not from here. We have a home. Our home is called Africa. One day we are going there. What we are seeing there is what they call the Babylon system. You know about it more than I do. And it was within this period that African unity was very paramount. The 1960s was the year of Africa. And all these things became prominent. And at the end of the day, it affected Bob Marley's growing. By the time he became a mature man, they formed what they call the Wailing Wailers from 1963 to 1974 with Bonnie Spear and Peter Tosh. To tell you that Bob Marley knew what he was doing, he had been groomed. The first record they produced was Catch a Fire. Slave driver, the table is turning. Catch a fire so you can get burned. Every time I hear the crack of the whip, my blood runs cold. Exactly what was happening within the slave era, 13th, 19th, and 17th century. By the late 1970s and early 80s, Bob Marley's music veered into politics. It was no more moralizing, exciting. It was political demand. And in one of his lyrics, he said, every man has a right to decide his destiny. I think that this line can be seen in one of his albums, in Survivor. And in this judgment, there's no partiality. So arm in arm, this struggle, that is the only way we can overcome our trouble. Because like Nkrumah said, an exploiter cannot give right to the exploited on a platter of gold. But Marley was rehearsing this. It's only through the prison of struggle that you can get your right. The slave must get their right. Because, according to him, this system is, Babylon system is a vampire, sucking the blood of the sufferers, deceiving the people continually, building churches and universities. Now, these are bourgeois things that we are doing to, for the benefit of the privileged. If you go to Cape Castor, you will discover that there's a gate called a port of no return. And on top of it, you see the Anglican Church. That's what Bob Marley is saying here. Now, what God are they praying when millions are underneath, crying, dying? As soon as they're taken to the ship, it's a point of no return. There's a church praying. Now we have to ask ourselves, they are praying to which God? Of course, they pray to God. Thank God we have got enough slaves, Africans who work for us. But Marley also opened again in Exodus, which is very important, movement of Jah people, which won an award in the BBC. Open your eyes, look within. Are you satisfied with the life you are living? We know where we are going. We know where we are from. We are leaving Babylon. We are going to our father's land. Of course, these were the kind of parental upbringing that they got from the beginning. But Marley had convinced himself that he's not part of the system. He has a place, and he wants to go to that place. And that place is called Africa. But it was in 1964 that Bob Marley also gave a notice that he's not here to mix any words, that he has known his identity, and his identity cannot be compromised. He's an African. In 1964, Haile Selassie, which that is deified to here, seen as a god, delivered a speech in the United Nations. And that speech was adopted. I'm not going to quote all, but he said, there's going to be war everywhere in the south, northeast, until the philosophy which hold one race superior and another inferior is finally and permanently discredited and abandoned, until there's no first class and second class citizens of any nation. What Bob Marley said in the 80s, in the 70s, is still haunting all of us today. There's racial discrimination everywhere. And this is why the political economy of the world is skewed in such a way that the developed countries get more than the least developed countries in the guise of what you call globalization. But Marley went on to release more records, which I cannot because of time. But all the things he says synchronize with the feelings of African leaders by the 1960s. And unfortunately, before he died, it was as if he knew that he was going to die. Two things, he said two statements. And I'm beginning, in all my researches, I'm beginning to wonder whether the man knew that he was going to die at the age of 36. Because all the things he was saying at that time, presupposing the fact that he was a man in a hurry to deliver. In an album, he captured the Redemption song, which was a solo performance. Emancipate yourself from mental slavery, which is what is worrying Africa today. African students are bogged down by dependency complex. We see things through the prism of banalization theory. Like my brother said, what is the identity of an African? Instead of looking for the identity of an African, we are looking for the identity of the West. Today in Nigeria, if you want to be an African, you are seen as a Jew man. You are seen as a local man. What is prominent is for you to modernize in the guise of the West. And this is what Bob Marley is telling us. We are suffering from mental slavery, because none but ourselves can free our mind. Have no fear for atomic energy, because that will not stop the time. How long shall they kill our prophets and we stand aside and look? Like Franz Fanon said, we have to take a decision as people that have been humiliated and discriminated. Are we going to be onlookers in this game of struggle, or we are going to be to acquiesce with the exploitative tendencies of people? But before I conclude, Bob Marley made a statement which presupposes that he knew where he was going. And I think I will read it. By the time he was going to round up, he declared, one bright morning, when the light is over, I will fly away. Did he have a premonition that he was going to die? Fly away to where? Maybe we don't have opportunity to ask him questions now because he's dead. But in my own opinion, he came for a specific purpose, to open our eyes, and he has gone. And that is the function of many historical figures in the world. They come here, perform their own specific function, and they go like a flash. Let me conclude quickly. Today, Africa is humiliated by globalization. Africa is now poorer than what it used to be in the 60s and 70s. We are disunited. Let me give you a typical example. By the time Gaddafi was killed, I'm not here to defend him. Many people were of opinion that there would have been an African solidarity, whether he was bad or not. But most African countries were in the Security Council when Resolution 1973 was passed to deal with Gaddafi. Now, where did the AU solidarity, where were they? Why they don't make it an African affair so that they can deal with Gaddafi in the African way? But they allowed external forces to determine for them. And that is what is happening today. But we have a hope. But Mali is telling us to open our eyes. That nothing will happen to us with determination, with struggle, because you are right. Human rights cannot be given to you on a platter of gold. You must fight for it. You must protest. You must talk, as we are talking now. In conclusion, therefore, the only way we can preserve the legacies of Bob Marley is like this, and I want to read, with permission, Chair, I want to read this section. While acknowledging the efforts of successive leaders to uphold the dignity of the continent, but these have become a mirage because of unpopular and undemocratic regimes, which degenerate to dictatorship and become a resource of conflicts and wars. The civil society must not relent in convoking conferences like this, encouraging inter-African interaction, and serving as a progressive watchdog for leaders to respect the hallowed tenet of democracy. A commitment to building a strong and solid democratic foundation is a commitment to African unity and a commitment to the sustenance of Mali's legacy. In conclusion, therefore, history has given to mankind outstanding individuals who have made significant contribution to society and who, in fact, are significant of their contribution. It is the task of the chroniclers of history to make a proper analysis of the role of these individuals. Robert Nesta Marley is deservedly part of the pantheon of that historical figures of the 20th century and merits admission into the Humanities Hall of Fame. Thank you very much.
Welcome to those who have joined us, just joined us. Final presenter this morning, Professor Mike Allain. He teaches in the Department of Recording Industry. Remind me which university, Mike? Middle Tennessee State. My brain is not so good nowadays. And he's the author of the recently published Encyclopedia of Reggae. His paper this morning, Reggae in the Material World, the Police Revisited.
The British rock group The Police epitomizes the assimilation of reggae aesthetics into the pop mainstream. With sales unparalleled by most reggae acts, The Police have become synonymous with hybridized reggae identities by integrating the genre's rhythms and spatialities into their albums from 1978 to 1983, and by employing such elements more consistently than their pop counterparts. The group's long-term significance is powerfully underlined by lead singer Sting's recent performance of the Police hit single Walking on the Moon during the 2013 Grammy Awards tribute to Bob Marley, certainly a major irony custom-made for this paper. This presentation primarily explores the paradoxical influence the group has exerted in the reggae world, culminating in the release of several tribute albums that celebrate the Police's creativity despite their pop reconstruction and homogenization of the reggae text. By revisiting 4 specific tribute collections released between 1997 and 2008, the presentation analyzes the sound of cultural reinterpretation, both by the Police themselves and by the reggae acts who have re-presented their songs. The objective is to broaden the holistic sonic framework for re-examination of the Police's legacy in the reggae world. There is truly some central paradox in the very idea of reggae bands paying tribute to a group which, in the words of Police drummer Stuart Copeland, completely bastardized reggae in the 1970s.
Dub sounds became part of the musical mix for many British rock and punk bands at that time.
Now, police came along and turned reggae into rock and roll by adopting the Jimi Hendrix experience style of a three-piece band, drums, bass and guitar, and playing reggae.
We completely bastardized reggae. We plundered it without remorse. We took from it what was useful to us, but we made no attempt to repackage it and deliver it back unto the people, which would have been false. We try to be as mercenary as possible because we want to conquer the world, but actually we can't resist playing with this thing that really is fascinating us and turns us on, and we find this new rhythmic formula and which applies to Sting's newfound ability to write fancy chords with a guitarist who can play them, and it was like candy for us.
This mercenary pillage to which Copeland refers played its own role in the broader mainstream popularization of reggae. But the extent of the appropriation with enormous commercial rewards immediately poses both musical and ideological questions about the music's arrest and detention by the police. Couldn't resist that, sorry. Of course, the tribute album process functions not only to illuminate the original performer, but also to draw attention to the artists covering the songs, in effect crossing a bridge further into the very material world of the recording industry. The formation of the Police intersected in 1977 with the rise of punk rock in England and its accompanying reggae soundtrack, though ultimately the group was a hybrid combination of those and other influences and never truly and fully aligned with genre authenticity. It wasn't unusual to find newer punk and pop bands of the era integrating fragments of reggae aesthetics into their music. But unlike most of their cohorts, the Police made the process an intrinsic element of their identity, epitomized by the title of their second album released in 1979, Regatta de Blanc, or loosely interpreted, White Reggae. Historically, the band's appearance was preceded by several rock and pop artists harnessing aspects of reggae's instrumental accents and scoring major hits with those songs. But while offerings such as the several Bob Marley compositions recorded by Johnny Nash, Paul Simon's Mother and Child Reunion, or the Eagles' Hotel California utilized the sonic texture and rhythmic characteristics of reggae to varying degrees, the lyrical content often veered away from reggae's subject matter. Even Eric Clapton's 1974 chart-topping version of The Wailers' I Shot the Sheriff dislocated the song's survivalist integrity, danger, and menace, despite using the same lyrics, articulated differently. Many Police songs encompassed political and metaphysical dimensions, yet the shadow of the established pop precedents loomed large in the band's career, despite their more clinical and calculated expression of reggae mechanics. One record reviewer has accurately suggested that the music of the Police didn't revere its components as much as recontextualize them. The tribute albums carry this process another step forward, potentially redefining songs which were influenced by reggae and that reflected elements of its content. Some may interpret this as a musical recolonization process, but any such assessments must fully encompass the scope of the tribute album's cultural, aesthetic, and economic dimensions. As implied by the presentation's title, the song Spirits in the Material World will be a recurring element. The hierarchical dynamics of race and cultural identity in popular music, and in reggae in particular, have once again been brought into oblique focus by the recent controversial debate over Volkswagen's American Super Bowl TV ad featuring the use of a Jamaican accent by a white office worker. There are some evident co-optation parallels between this debate and the role of the Police in the popularization of reggae aesthetics, although if memory serves me correctly, there was little cultural alarm initially raised when the Police first emerged. Indeed, the Police, with the re-accentuation of their instrumentation, have had a remarkable long-term effect, likely to be far greater than the 2013 Volkswagen ad, which will probably soon be forgotten. Some of the premises used to challenge the TV ad would also need to be applied to the vocal and instrumental inflections of white or multiracial reggae artists such as Mattis Yahoo, Revolution, and The Green, all of whom have outsold most Jamaican and or black reggae acts in America in recent years, not to mention multiple lesser-known international bands and the historically earlier case of UB40. Some critics, policing cultural boundaries, have viewed the Volkswagen ad as a sonic reanimation of blackface, with studio technology and performance emphases as the new minstrel makeup. Late 2012 sales figures from America demonstrate that Jimmy Cliff's own recent Grammy-winning Rebirth album sold just over 33,000 copies, while in contrast, both Mattis Yahoo and Revolution sold near or above 50,000 copies. And incidentally, all of these acts appear on next week's Billboard's reggae album charts. These circumstances clearly suggest that the cultural complexities contributing to the emergence and rise of the police are far from being resolved in the 21st century, thus reinforcing the need for retrospective analysis of pop reggae's most influential force. I would further suggest that the most significant comparative point is that while the Volkswagen ad utilizes a quintessentially authentic reggae artist, there is no reggae to be heard at all. Instead, there is the aura of a reggae artist rather than an actual performance of the art form, a point which is conceptually relevant to the discussion of the police. Miles Copeland, brother of police drummer Stuart Copeland, has operated in three crucial capacities, or at least three: as manager of the police, later manager of Sting as a solo artist, and as the head of ARC 21 Records. The first police single, 1977's Fallout, was released on the Illegal Records label, also started by Miles Copeland, while his ARC 21 Records operation is responsible for the 2 volumes of Regatta Mondata police tribute albums released respectively in 1997 and 1998. In addition, Copeland's Illegal Songs Inc. administered the music publishing. Both albums symbolically appropriate key visual aspects of the 2 biggest selling police albums, 1981's Ghost in the Machine, triple platinum, and 1983's Synchronicity, 8 times platinum, capitalizing on their currency as commercially recognizable artifacts, while simultaneously infusing the image of the Regatta Mondata tribute records with a reggae-related aura. Featuring various performers boldly, if sometimes unrealistically, touted on both collections as the world's greatest reggae artists, the Regatta Mondata albums each provide a mere short paragraph, that is no more than 2 brief sentences, of liner note material. This not only suggests a great deal about how well the music and concept speak for themselves, but also how little historical context was deemed necessary by ARC 21 Records, even more than a decade after the police initially dissolved. However, in terms of overall musical content, neither volume represents a major reinterpretive transformation of police material, and Volume 2 is significantly weaker than its predecessor. Unlike later such tribute releases, the first volume of Regatta Mondata was at least partially assembled from pre-existing recordings, and this circumstance points to the virtual inevitability of such compilations. The opening collection is commercially reinforced by Sting's collaboration with Ziggy Marley on the political counter-narrative One World, Not Three, and his vocal appearance on the socio-philosophical Spirits in the Material World with Pato Banton. Banton actually created a different version as early as 1990 for his Wise Up album, interestingly released on Miles Copeland's IRS Records label. The version appearing on the first 1997 Regatta Mondata album is actually a revamped effort, updated with new instrumentation and based on a 1995 soundtrack contribution to the movie Ace Ventura: When Nature Calls. Here's a short clip of the intro from the original 1981 Police song, fused with the 1997 version that's on the first Regatta Mondata album, and then that 1995 version, which was released as a single. A decade beyond the Regatta Mondata series, 2008 witnessed the release of 2 further police tribute reggae albums on different labels. Shanachie Records' Spirits in the Material World, a reggae tribute to the police, was released in February 2008. As label head Randall Grass points out, unlike the Regatta Mondata collections on Arc 21 Records, which included licensed tracks, Spirits in the Material World featured completely new versions of police songs. This tribute collection, produced by reggae legends Inner Circle, who, by the way, also appear on Volume 2 of the Regatta Mondata series, also lacks liner notes. So in response to inquiries, executive producer Randall Grass provided his perspective on the project. He says they consciously tried to avoid duplicating too much of the material from the Regatta Mondata tributes. In what appears to be a press release for Spirits in the Material World, it's asserted that the album sought to reclaim and amplify the reggae element in the police's music by doing overtly reggae versions of a hand-picked set of police hits and favorite album tracks.
Almost imperceptible, something inexpressible, science insusceptible, logic so inflexible, gradually connectable, yet nothing invincible.
In response to a query regarding possible reggae artist ambivalence about covering police songs, Grass refutes the idea and instead suggests that the integration of reggae inflections by the group helped take the genre into the mainstream, though in the aftermath, many reggae fans were dismissive of the police's inauthenticity. Its album cover clearly echoed the graphics of the third Police album, 1980's Zenyatta Mondata, perhaps unintentionally foreshadowing a relative absence of creative distinction between the original songs and their cover versions. Interestingly, each of the tribute compilations assessed so far include some police songs which were not originally reggae styled, such as King of Pain and Every Breath You Take. But arguably on this particular record, the aesthetic impact of including performances by non-reggae artists like Joan Osborne theoretically broadens appeal but keeps the record from transcending the material world. Shanachie Records reports that sales were disappointing, partly due to the commercial uncertainties surrounding concept projects. The 2008 Dub Zan album, Police in Dub, is sonically the most adventurous tribute collection overall, and certainly the most cohesive, despite several guest vocal appearances, alongside the mostly instrumental renditions. Capably helmed by the Cologne, Germany-based Okada Supersound, Police in Dub goes further than any of the other tribute records in reinterpreting the songs, effectively harnessing the deconstructively spatial dub-wise potentialities. Released on the Echo Beach label, and unlike the other tributes, packed with 10 pages of contextual history encompassing both the police and the making of the record, Okada's project echoes the organic performative dimension of the police and blends it selectively with roots articulation and a variety of digital textures. It's also the only collection of the albums under assessment here that is focused completely on dub reinterpretations of police material. And the introduction to the revamped version of Message in a Bottle transports the song into an ambient electronic territory that it never previously occupied. Notably, many of the selected songs, about a third of the record, go beyond the usual predictable hit suspects. For example, they encompass an entirely instrumental rendering of Once Upon a Daydream, a song only included on the Police's 1993 Message in a Box compilation, and a slowed-down reiteration of Driven to Tears, one of the standout tracks from the Zenyatta Mondata album. The dub-sound version of 1981's Spirits in the Material World, featuring the dub poetry of Benjamin Zephaniah, replaces the original lyrical text with a narrative paradoxically emphasizing the immaterial realms of consciousness, somewhat like the dub medium itself.
Make me live it up, just love and give it up. Just meditate and leave the state and lift your spirit up. We are not here, not over there. Get metaphysical, for we are spiritual.
Ultimately, it's still difficult to conclusively determine whether the status of the police in the reggae world is based on ardent appreciation, commercial apathy, or collective cultural amnesia. What remains certain is that the police imprint and impact is both deep and distinct, suggesting that the records featured in this presentation will not be the last such reggae tributes to a band whose career unexpectedly helped propel the music further into the material world. Thanks.
Thank you very much to all the presenters. Let's give them another round of applause. I want to open the floor now for questions. We have a mic in the center of the room. We have about 10 minutes or so for questions. If we do that, 10 or 15 minutes, if we do that, we can then allow the conference to regain time lost this morning in our late start.
There's a long tradition in Jamaica and the African diaspora generally. There are two tendencies of this tradition. And that tradition is the construction of notions of freedom based on transmigration, based on returning to Africa. Enslaved African did many songs. In fact, wake songs, funeral songs during slavery, and even after, were songs about freedom, were songs about going back to Africa. During slavery, the only way Africans see themselves going back to Africa is by dying, and their spirit, what we call Dopi in Jamaica, or Bonage in Haiti, or Ori in Cuba, would go back home. There is also a second tradition developed, especially during the emergence of Rastafari. And that tradition is that tradition you hear in Rastaman chant, or Satama Sagana, or Move Out of Babylon, Exodus. So there are similar traditions. The more modern one is more reflective that there's a stable diaspora, but there is still a need to go back home. And this one is less spiritual. There's an element of the old spiritual in it, but it is more even practical in terms of people going back to Africa.
This question is for Michael A. I didn't catch all the presentation, so forgive me if I'm asking something that was said before. What is it about the Jamaican culture where a group like the Police is not embraced, where Bob Marley could hear them sometime in the past, recognize that they are good, but somehow they don't have resonance in Jamaica? What is it about our culture and how we make music and how we see the world? Why a group like the Police is not embraced locally, and other groups like them?
Well, I mean, my response will be very subjective, of course. I think it has to do with some of those intangible elements in terms of the rhythmic chemistry of the music and the sonic texture of it. You know, authenticity is a very loose and fluid concept. But whereas it may be very difficult sometimes to pin down what authenticity is, people are always quick to recognize something that is inauthentic. And I think there's perhaps an intuitive response to a collective sound representing a genre. And when that sound has elements of it but not the totality, then it's not going to be assimilated in quite the same way by all audiences. And I think what the Police did was create an amalgam that was right for their target audience, because they weren't targeting the reggae audience. You know, they were going for a hybrid sound for an audience that wanted perhaps a taste of reggae without going the full length, to get the full dreadness with the full bass and the full dub. So I think that the Police in many ways embodied a kind of a compromise of the sound, which is why I found it so curious in many ways that Sting was then performing a Police song the other day on the Grammy Award tribute to Bob Marley. You know, there are a lot of ironies there. You can understand why he's there and how he serves, how he, as a representative of the Police, serves as a bridge between the two worlds, still after all these years. So it's a bit of a long answer, but there you go.
And it is the politics of that which I am interested in. The fact that for so many years, Bob Marley has been such an icon, and we still need a bridge at a staging such as the Grammy to be able to access Marley, and not only Marley, but a tribute to Marley. So the politics of that is very interesting for me. And in fact, music insiders within the business go a little step further to talk about how it is. It was actually the sanctioning of someone like Bruno Mars that we were seeing as the next American icon of island pop or island music, so to speak, and that this really had nothing to do with Marley, but that's a whole other conversation. Any other questions?
Pleasant good morning to everybody. I wasn't here, as you can see, I'm just arriving, but judging from what I think went on, I have a few pertinent questions I'd like to ask. First is to Mr. Lawrence Bamikoli. On your paper, identifying the African woman in the music, I would say in Africa. How do you see the participation and development of African women in popular music, such as the one we expose here in the Caribbean? What shape is that taking? Is it coming on, given the propensity for sidelining women in the African culture, so to speak? And to Mr. Christian Akani, celebrating African unity and the diaspora. Could you please tell us something about how you see the African popular music entertainment groups connecting with their cultural heritage to develop their the lyrical contents of their music and to make it palatable and appealing to the cultural values of the villages and so on?
Yes, there are different kinds of music in Africa. The one I presented is not quite so much original because it's also a mixture of some Christian beliefs. Because when we look at the song, she actually mentioned the idea of God as a creator. And from all indications, the notion of God in that song is a Christian God, not the typical Yoruba God. There are also music that are purely Christian music, that they are supposed to be worship songs that are being produced, you know, as songs in the churches. So this kind of music depends on the type of outlook and the artist. So some of them are purely traditional, like what we call jegele, oriki, that kind of thing. Some of them are intermediate between the traditional and the modern, whereas some of them are purely Christian. So there are divisions, you know. So we cannot just actually say that one is popular music, so depending on the outlook of the woman. But definitely the point I'm making here is that whether it is traditional or modern or Christian, there are certain core values that actually cut across these cultures, which the lady was trying to stress in the song. The woman having a personal identity as a woman, as a wife also, as a mother, as a daughter-in-law, all these various levels of identity also have different levels of responsibilities. By the time we put them together, my argument is that they can be put together to identify the African woman, even though there are a lot of changes in space and time. That is my argument.
Yeah, thank you very much, Martins. I'm very happy with your question. It is the root of what we are saying today. There is no better time for African unity. First, continental unity and the diasporic unity. There is no better time than now. There is much emphasis on cultural unity. It is very good. But we should emphasize more on socio-political unity. Because if we do that, it will be easy to first understand ourselves. Most Africans do not know the problems of Jamaicans or the Caribbeans. For instance, what he just explained now has given reason why this song was sung by Bob Marley and the rest. Most people in the continent think that Africans constitute 40% of the population in Jamaica or in the Caribbean. So we need unity to understand ourselves. We need unity to appreciate ourselves. We need unity to challenge our problems. If there's unity, it will be easy to assist Jamaica or the Caribbean in any way, particularly in the development of their artists. The last time I came here, I met the ambassador of Nigeria here, and he told me that it's a question of politics. From Lagos to Kingston, it's about 8 hours, and that will make it possible for inter-travel, for Jamaicans to come to Nigeria and Nigeria to come here. But today, before you come to Jamaica, it's a real trouble. You either travel from Africa to Britain, and Britain you come here. Or the way I travel from Lagos to Atlanta, which is about 10 hours from Atlanta here. And consider the economic cost. How many people can bear it? In this period of structural adjustment program, he knows what I'm talking about. By 1986, when we went to World Bank, Nigerians saw hell. And that was why yesterday, when I heard that Jamaica is discussing with the World Bank, I sounded a note of caution. The conditionalities may be tempting, but as soon as you enter, you can never come back. Therefore, we need conferences like this. As soon as the conference is over, it should be packaged and sent outside. Many people from the continent need this. And for us here now, I have become an ambassador. From what I've learned here, I will take it to my students who do not know anything about this. But beyond that, we still need to do more at the level of government, at the level of institutions like this school. There's nothing wrong with the University of West Indies collaborating with my university, collaborating with premier universities in Nigeria, in Africa. That is the only way we can understand ourselves. And that is the cross of what Bob Marley was preaching. And if we're able to achieve this, then we have gone a long way in sustaining what I call the Bob Marley legacy. Because I see him as a vision. You can interpret what he said in any way. in line with Bob Marley tradition. But we see it as a man of vision, a man who has seen the future, and a man who is in a hurry to accomplish, to send the message across. And as soon as the message is over, he goes. And that was why he said, one bright morning, when my work is over, I will fly away. Thank you very much.
Take one final question.
This is not really a question. It's a comment on the questions raised by my brother here. The first point I want to make is that women in the music industry in Nigeria, for example, they've done a lot. And in various ways they have contributed, you know, Christian, Igbokwe, those who are in indigenous music, as he mentioned. Actually, women are, apart from the performing artists like Alarin Joe and the people who play, you know, the indigenous talking drums and so on, women are mostly the singers. And in the songs, you also have the repository of the culture, the history, you know, and everything. Yes. But then there was something else which you, you know, suggested in your comment. And that is how, you know, indigenous Africans treat women. And that is just based on what we received. That's what I call the orthodox story. The script that many people don't know is that in most Yoruba societies, while you have the king, you also have the queen. The king has his wives. The queen is not the wife of the king. And you do have this in many Yoruba societies, but nobody ever, you know, knows about that. But research has been showing that in many Yoruba societies, women were not in any way, you know, in the background. And in many cases, you do find that women are by far more powerful, you know, than the men. The man just doesn't go out and do something and come home. You will have to face your wife or your mother. That's right. And you'll have to explain and justify why you did that. But you see, the cultural thing, which we are taking overboard now, which we are going overboard, is the idea that freedom means nudity, it means recklessness, it means no control, you know, and that is part of the reason why the Islamic countries are very resistant to the idea of, you know, women just opening up and dressing anyhow. And incidentally, even in Islamic countries, you still have prostitution and promiscuity. But you see, the idea is that people feel when their culture is encroached on, there is a need to resist it. You know, but it's only because of colonialism and slavery that we tend to embrace that, you know, of the oppressor more than we value our own. Thank you.
All right. We would have done significantly to help the conference catch up on time. I want to thank all of you. You've been a wonderful audience, and I want to especially thank the presenters again. Thank you all.